The moment billionaire CEO Ethan Brooks stepped into the grand ballroom, conversations died instantly. Executives straightened their jackets, investors lowered their voices, employees who had spent years trying to impress him hurried to greet him with nervous smiles. Some even bowed their heads as he passed, desperate for a second of his attention. Ethan was used to it. Power followed him everywhere. But one person in the room didn't seem impressed. Emma, the quiet young maid carrying a tray of champagne glasses, walked straight past him without bowing, smiling, or even slowing down. Ethan stopped. Everyone noticed. His fiancée, Madison, noticed most of all. Beautiful, wealthy, and obsessed with appearances, Madison stared at Emma as though she had committed an unforgivable crime. "You," she snapped across the ballroom, "do you have any idea who you just ignored?" Emma turned calmly. "I'm here to work, ma'am, not to worship anyone." A shocked silence swept through the room. Madison's face hardened. Then she laughed cruelly. "Typical beggar," she said loudly. "Give people like you a uniform and suddenly you forget your place." Emma froze. Ethan's expression changed instantly. The guests expected him to defend his fiancée. After all, their wedding was only weeks away, and some of the most powerful people in the city were watching. Instead, Ethan slowly removed the engagement ring from Madison's finger. Gasps erupted. But what he did next stunned everyone even more. He walked toward Emma, looked directly into her trembling eyes, and said something that made Madison turn completely pale. Because Ethan knew something about the maid that nobody else in that ballroom knew. Something connected to his past. Something powerful enough to destroy his engagement, expose a carefully buried secret, and change Emma's life forever. Who was Emma really? Why had Ethan recognized her? What secret was Madison about to discover? And what did the CEO do that left the entire room speechless? Before we reveal what Ethan knew about Emma, and why one cruel word was about to destroy a future Madison believed was already hers, kindly subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Stories like this remind us that character is revealed not by how we treat the powerful, but by how we treat those we believe can do nothing for us. If you believe dignity should never depend on wealth, status, clothing, or position, subscribe now so you don't miss the powerful twist waiting at the end. Ethan stood 3 feet away from Emma, holding the diamond ring between his fingers. Madison stared at him. "Ethan," she whispered. He did not look at her. His eyes remained fixed on Emma's face. For several seconds, nobody moved. The orchestra had stopped playing. A waiter stood frozen beside a fountain of champagne. One of the directors from Ethan's company still had his hand halfway raised, as though he had forgotten what he had been about to say. Emma looked uncomfortable now. Not frightened. Not exactly. It was something deeper. Recognition. And that was what made Ethan's heart begin to pound. He had seen those eyes before. Not in a boardroom. Not in a magazine. Not at a charity event. 23 years earlier. In the rain. "You're Sarah Whitmore's daughter," Ethan said quietly. The tray in Emma's hands trembled. A champagne glass tipped, rolled sideways, and shattered against the marble floor. The sound cut through the ballroom like a gunshot. Madison's face lost its color. Emma stared at Ethan. "You knew my mother." Ethan swallowed. The room suddenly seemed too small. He could smell rain, even though there wasn't a cloud outside. He could hear the sound of tires against wet pavement. He could see a small wooden house at the edge of an Ohio town, the porch light flickering in a storm. And then, just as quickly, he was 16 years old again. Hungry, cold, terrified, and running. Ethan Brooks had not always been a billionaire. There had been a time when the shoes on his feet had holes in them. A time when he counted quarters before entering grocery stores. A time when he slept wherever he could after his father disappeared and his mother died. Most of the people standing in that ballroom knew the polished version of his history. They knew he had come from humble beginnings. It sounded inspiring when magazine writers said it. Humbling, almost romantic. But poverty had not felt romantic. It had felt like watching electricity disappear from your home in the middle of winter. It had felt like pretending you weren't hungry because your mother had already skipped dinner twice. It had felt like being 16 years old and discovering that the landlord had left your belongings on the sidewalk because there was no longer anyone alive to pay the rent. Ethan had told almost nobody what happened after that. And he had certainly never told Madison. Because there were parts of his past he had spent millions of dollars trying to forget. One part had a name. Sarah Whitmore. Emma slowly lowered the tray onto a nearby table. "My mother died 11 years ago," she said. Ethan shut his eyes briefly. "I know." Emma's expression changed. "How?" Madison stepped forward quickly. "Enough." Her voice was sharp. Too sharp. Ethan finally turned toward her. Madison forced a nervous smile. "This is our engagement celebration. Whatever sentimental story this employee is trying to create can wait." Employee. The word struck Ethan strangely. 5 minutes earlier, he might not have noticed it. Now he noticed everything. The contempt in Madison's voice. The way she looked at Emma without really seeing her. The way several hotel staff members avoided Madison's eyes. And something else. Fear. He had seen that fear before. Not tonight. Over the past 18 months. Drivers became quiet around Madison. Servers disappeared from rooms when she entered. Assistants apologized constantly. A housekeeper at Ethan's penthouse had resigned after only 6 days. At the time, Madison had shrugged. She stole perfume. Ethan had believed her. Why wouldn't he? He had built an empire by reading people, yet somehow he had stopped reading the woman he intended to marry. Perhaps because he wanted something from her that had nothing to do with business. Normalcy. A family. A future untouched by the past. Madison had arrived in his life at precisely the moment loneliness had become unbearable. His company had just completed the largest acquisition in its history. Newspapers called him unstoppable. Financial networks praised his instincts. His face appeared on magazine covers. Then Ethan returned every night to a silent penthouse 40 floors above Manhattan. Success echoed differently when nobody was waiting for you. Madison filled the silence. She laughed loudly, decorated quickly, planned everything. She convinced him that a man who controlled companies on 3 continents shouldn't eat dinner alone at midnight. 6 months later, he proposed. His oldest friend, Daniel Mercer, had asked him one question afterward. "Do you love her, or do you love not being lonely?" Ethan had been furious. Now Daniel's question returned like a whisper from another room. Emma folded her hands in front of her. "I'm not trying to create a story," she said. Madison laughed. "Of course not. You just happen to work the event of one of the richest men in the country, and suddenly he knows your dead mother." "Madison." Ethan's tone stopped her. She looked at him. Something flashed across her face. Not embarrassment. Panic. Ethan saw it. And once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. "You knew her name," he said. Madison blinked. "What?" "When I said Sarah Whitmore." "So, You reacted before Emma confirmed it. I reacted because this entire situation is ridiculous. Ethan stepped closer. How do you know who Sarah Whitmore was? Madison stared at him. Around them, the guests were becoming restless. This was no longer a social embarrassment. It was becoming a public unraveling. Madison lowered her voice. Not here. Then where? At home. No. Her jaw tightened. Ethan. He held up the engagement ring. You called her a beggar. Madison glanced around. You're ending our engagement over a word. No. The answer came immediately. I'm asking myself what kind of person says that word when she thinks the person she's speaking to has no power. The silence grew heavier. Emma looked away. Madison's cheeks burned. You're humiliating me. Ethan almost laughed. The irony was painful. You humiliated her. She's a maid. And there it was. Not the word. The belief behind it. Several employees visibly stiffened. Ethan stared at the woman he had intended to marry. Madison seemed to realize too late what she had said. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. Her eyes hardened. For the first time, the graceful socialite disappeared. You want to throw away 2 years because some girl carrying glasses has a tragic background. Ethan looked at Emma again. No. His voice lowered. I want to know why the daughter of the woman who saved my life is serving champagne at my engagement party. Emma's breath caught. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Madison stepped backward. And Ethan remembered everything. He had been 16. 3 days after his mother's funeral, Ethan had boarded a bus with $28 and no destination. He got off when the money ran out. A small Ohio town. He spent his first night beneath the awning of a closed hardware store. The second behind a diner. By the third, rain had soaked through everything he owned. He walked until his legs shook. Then a woman pulled over beside him in an old blue station wagon. She rolled down the window. You'll freeze. He kept walking. She drove slowly beside him. I'm not asking where you came from. No response. I'm not calling the police. Still nothing. I have soup. That stopped him. Her name was Sarah Whitmore. She lived in a modest house with faded yellow siding and a porch that leaned slightly left. She had a daughter, a little girl with enormous brown eyes who hid behind Sarah's skirt when Ethan entered. Emma, 4 years old. Sarah gave Ethan dry clothes that belonged to her late husband. She fed him chicken soup. Then she committed an act Ethan never forgot. She did not ask him to earn kindness. For 6 weeks, Sarah allowed Ethan to sleep on the old sofa in her den. She found him work at a mechanic's garage. She helped him enroll in school. When he told her he was going to quit because he needed money, she slapped an application form onto the kitchen table. Education first. I'm not going to college. You don't know that. I can't afford it. You don't know that either. What I know is that nobody is coming to rescue me. Sarah had stared at him for a long moment. Maybe being helped isn't the same as being rescued. He remembered those words decades later. Sarah never had much. But she gave. Food. Time. Space. Hope. And one winter evening, after Ethan was accepted into a state university with partial aid, Sarah gave him an envelope containing $840. He refused. She pushed it back. That's everything you have. No, It nearly is. Then turn it into something. Ethan did. He turned it into textbooks, food, and eventually a tiny computer repair business. The business became a software company. The software company became Brooks Global Technologies. Years later, when Ethan returned to find Sarah, she had moved. He hired investigators. They found fragments, a forwarding address, then another, a remarriage that ended quickly, medical debt. Eventually, Sarah disappeared from the paper trail. Ethan told himself he would search again. Then came expansion. Investors, lawsuits, Europe, Asia. 100 excuses disguised as responsibilities. By the time he searched again, Sarah was dead. The news had hollowed him out. He funded a community center anonymously in the town where she had once lived. He established scholarships. But guilt had a way of rejecting substitutes. Now Sarah's daughter was standing directly in front of him. And she was wearing a maid's uniform. "Why didn't you contact me?" Ethan asked. Emma gave him a strange look. "I did." Ethan went still. "What?" Madison's eyes snapped toward Emma. Emma noticed. "So did Ethan. I wrote you 6 years ago. I never received a letter. I sent more than one." "To where?" "Your company, your foundation, later directly to your office." Ethan turned toward his chief of staff, Michael Grant, who stood near the rear of the ballroom. Michael looked genuinely confused. "I never saw anything." Emma reached beneath the collar of her uniform and pulled out a thin silver chain. Attached to it was a small brass key. Ethan recognized it immediately. His throat tightened. Sarah's house key. The one Ethan had lost when he left for college. Emma held it. "My mother kept this." Ethan reached toward it, but stopped before touching. "She had it. She found it under the sofa after you left. She kept saying you'd come back for it." Pain moved through him. Emma's voice softened. "She followed your career." Ethan looked away. "She was proud of you." Those words hurt more than accusation would have. "Why didn't she contact me?" Emma hesitated. "She tried." Madison suddenly stepped forward. "This is absurd." Ethan turned. "Why are you so nervous?" "I am not nervous." "You are." "I am angry because a stranger is manipulating you." Emma looked at Madison. "We are not strangers." The words were quiet. Madison froze. Ethan stared between them. "What does that mean?" Emma's expression changed. She seemed to be deciding whether to continue. Madison answered first. "I have never seen this woman in my life." Emma looked at her. "Yes, you have." Madison laughed, but the sound was brittle. "Where's?" "St. Matthew's Hospital." The color vanished from Madison's face. Ethan felt something cold move through him. "What happened at St. Matthew?" Emma looked at Ethan. "My mother spent her last 4 months there." Ethan stopped breathing for a second. "And Madison was there." "She volunteered for the Whitmore Foundation's charity publicity program." Ethan turned sharply. "The Whitmore Foundation." "His foundation." "Named after Sarah." Madison had suggested launching it 3 years ago after learning the story of a woman who had once helped Ethan. But Ethan had never told Madison Sarah's full story. He certainly had never told her Emma's name. At least he didn't think he had. His mind began retracing old conversations. One came back. A private dinner. Madison asking why he had never married. Ethan mentioning there had once been someone who taught him kindness. Madison asking her name. Had he answered, Sarah? Yes, but nothing else. Not Emma. Not the hospital. Not the letters. Ethan looked toward Madison. When did you meet Emma? I didn't. Emma's eyes filled with something colder than tears. You came into my mother's room. That's a lie. You were wearing a red coat. Madison's lips parted. You told my mother Ethan Brooks didn't remember her. Someone in the ballroom gasped. Ethan's voice came out almost soundless. What? Emma continued. You said he had moved on, that he was grateful for what she once did, but people from his past were contacting him constantly asking for money. No, Ethan whispered. Emma swallowed. My mother believed you. Ethan's eyes found Madison. She shook her head violently. She's lying. Emma reached into her apron. Madison moved. Just slightly. But Ethan saw it. Emma pulled out a folded piece of paper. This was in my mother's Bible after she died. Ethan took it. The paper was old and soft at the creases. The handwriting was Sarah's. Ethan recognized it instantly. His hands began shaking. Ethan, I'm sorry if contacting you embarrassed you. I never wanted anything from you. I only wanted Emma to know that kindness can travel farther than we ever see. The young woman from your office explained that your life is complicated now. I understand. Please don't feel guilty. You already gave me enough by becoming the man I knew you could be. Sarah. Ethan read it twice. Then a third time. The ballroom blurred. He remembered Sarah standing on that crooked porch, yelling at him to wear a coat. He remembered her cheering when he received his university acceptance. He remembered promising, one day I'm buying you a new house. Sarah had laughed. Buy yourself one first. He never bought hers. And she died believing he had rejected her. Ethan folded the letter carefully. Who was the woman? Emma looked directly at Madison. She was. Madison backed away. This is insane. Ethan's face hardened. You visited Sarah. No. Did you? No. Emma stepped forward. You had a red coat with gold buttons. Madison scoffed. Millions of women own red coats. You left your business card. Madison stopped. The entire ballroom seemed to lean inward. Emma took something else from her pocket. A small card. She handed it to Ethan. Madison Caldwell. Strategic Relations. Brooks Global Technologies. Ethan stared at it. The title was old. Madison had worked briefly as a consultant for Brooks Global before they began dating. She had always told Ethan they first met at an investor dinner. Now the chronology shifted. A sick possibility formed. You knew about Sarah before you met me. Madison said nothing. Ethan stepped closer. You knew. I knew the name. How? Madison looked around at the watching crowd. Ethan, please. How? Her breathing became shallow. I was working on donor research. That doesn't explain the hospital. She closed her eyes. For 1 second, Ethan saw defeat. Then it disappeared. You want the truth? Yes. She contacted the company. Emma stiffened. Madison continued. She claimed she knew you. She did know me. I didn't know that. You went to the hospital. I was trying to verify her story. By telling her I wanted nothing to do with her. Madison's face twisted. You were surrounded by people trying to use you. Everyone had a story. Everyone needed money. Everyone wanted access. She never asked for money. I didn't know that. You didn't bother finding out. Madison's eyes filled with tears. I was protecting you. Ethan stared. Those words. Protecting you. He had heard them before. A year earlier, when a former employee claimed Madison had gotten her fired after she became pregnant. Madison said she was protecting Ethan from a lawsuit. 6 months earlier, when Daniel stopped attending dinners. Madison said she was protecting Ethan from jealous friends. 3 months earlier, when Ethan's housekeeper disappeared suddenly. Madison said she was protecting him from theft. A pattern had been sitting directly in front of him. Protection that always ended with someone else disappearing. Ethan looked at Michael. Find Daniel. Michael nodded and immediately stepped aside with his phone. Madison laughed incredulously. You're calling Daniel now. I should have called him months ago. This girl shows up, and suddenly everyone is against me. Emma shook her head. I didn't show up by accident. Ethan turned. What do you mean? Emma looked toward the ballroom doors. I took this job because I knew you would be here. The revelation sent another murmur through the room. Madison pointed at her. There, she admitted it. Emma ignored her. I needed to see you face to face. Why? Because every letter disappeared. Ethan's chest tightened. What letters? The ones about my mother. And Emma hesitated. The ones about the trust. Madison went completely still. Ethan noticed. What trust? Emma looked confused. You do know. No. My mother created a trust before she died. With what money? She didn't. Emma looked at Madison. She said the money came from you. Ethan frowned. I never gave her money. Madison whispered, Ethan. He lifted a hand. What trust? Emma took a breath. $14 million. For the first time that evening, Ethan was speechless. 14 million. Several executives exchanged glances. Madison moved toward him. I can explain. Ethan slowly turned. That was all he needed. You know about it. Her silence confirmed everything. Emma's face changed. You told me you didn't. Madison snapped at her. You have no idea what you're talking about. I know my mother died believing Ethan created that trust. Ethan felt a new kind of dread. Who did? Emma reached into her pocket one final time. This is why I came. She handed him a photocopy of a bank document. Brooks Humanitarian Holdings. Authorized transfer $14 million. Beneficiary, Sarah Whitmore Community Trust. Signature approval, Ethan Brooks. Ethan stared at the signature. It looked like his. But it was. He knew every angle of his own signature. Someone had copied it almost perfectly. Almost. This is forged. Emma's eyes widened. Madison moved toward the door. Ethan noticed. Don't. She stopped. The billionaire CEO who had entered the ballroom, surrounded by bowed heads, was gone. In his place stood the 16-year-old boy Sarah Whitmore had once pulled from the rain. And he was furious. Security. 2 guards approached. Madison looked horrified. You're detaining me. I'm making sure you don't leave until I understand why my signature is on a $14 million transfer connected to the woman you lied to. Madison's tears disappeared. Something in her expression hardened. You really want to do this publicly? No, Ethan said. You did. Then Michael returned. His face was pale. Ethan. What? I reached Daniel. And he says you need to check the private archive. What archives? Your father's estate files. Ethan's stomach dropped. My father. Daniel had known Ethan since college. He knew the one subject Ethan never discussed. Thomas Brooks. The father who vanished when Ethan was 14. The man Ethan had assumed was dead. Michael swallowed. Daniel says your father was alive until 7 years ago. The world seemed to tilt. That's impossible. He says he can prove it. Ethan stared at him. Why didn't he tell me? Michael looked toward Madison. Apparently, he tried. Ethan closed his eyes. The engagement party had become a graveyard of buried truths. Sarah. The letters. The trust. Daniel. Now his father. Every road seemed to lead toward Madison. But the worst secret was still waiting. 2 hours later, Ethan stood inside the private library of his Manhattan penthouse. The ballroom guests had been sent home. Phones had been collected from key staff while attorneys prepared confidentiality notices. Madison sat across the room with her lawyer. Emma sat near the window, still wearing her uniform because she had refused Ethan's offer of replacement clothing. I'm comfortable like this, she said. He understood. After being called a beggar, changing into something expensive might have looked like surrender. Daniel arrived shortly after midnight. He looked older than Ethan remembered. Not because much time had passed. Because guilt had weight. Ethan stared at his oldest friend. You knew my father was alive. Daniel nodded. For years. Ethan punched him. The blow knocked Daniel against a bookshelf. Nobody moved. Daniel touched his lip. I deserved that. Why? I found him while researching the Whitmore Trust. What does my father have to do with Sarah? Daniel looked at Emma. Everything. Emma's face tightened. Daniel opened a folder. Thomas Brooks disappeared because he was running from federal fraud charges. He changed his name, moved west, and spent years laundering money through shell companies. Ethan's stomach turned. My father didn't have $14 million. No. Daniel looked at Madison. But her father did. Madison's attorney stood. My client will not participate in unsupported accusations. Daniel tossed a document onto the table. Then support this. Ethan picked it up. A partnership agreement. Thomas Brooks. Richard Caldwell. Madison's father. Dated 26 years earlier. Before Ethan's mother died. Before Sarah found him in the rain. Before Brooks Global existed. Ethan read the page. What is this? Daniel answered. Your father and Richard Caldwell were partners. Madison spoke quietly. That proves nothing. Daniel ignored her. They were involved in a fraudulent investment operation. Your father disappeared when authorities got close. Caldwell stayed, cooperated, and rebuilt his reputation. Ethan looked up. Why didn't my father go to prison? He had evidence against Caldwell. Emma leaned forward. What does this have to do with my mother? Daniel hesitated. Then Ethan understood. He looked at Emma. No. Daniel's silence confirmed it. No, Ethan repeated. Emma stood. What? Daniel looked at her gently. Sarah Whitmore was an accountant. Emma frowned. I know. She worked for a company owned by Richard Caldwell, Madison's father. Emma's face drained. Daniel continued. She discovered what they were doing. The room became silent. She was a whistleblower, Ethan asked. She tried to be. Daniel opened another file. But before she could testify, records disappeared. Witnesses changed their stories. Sarah lost her job. Ethan felt sick. And years later, she found me. Daniel nodded. Not by coincidence. Emma stepped back as if struck. What are you saying? Daniel looked between them. Sarah knew exactly who Ethan was when she picked him up that night. Ethan remembered the rain. The blue station wagon. Sarah saying, I'm not asking where you came from. He had always believed kindness led her to stop. What if something else had? Why? Daniel exhaled. Because she knew what your father had done to your mother. Ethan's blood chilled. My mother died of cancer. Daniel looked at him. She did. Then what are you talking about? Your mother discovered the fraud too. Ethan sat down. Memories returned in fragments. His parents arguing behind a bedroom door. His mother crying. His father leaving late at night. His mother once saying, if anything happens, you go to Aunt Rebecca. There had been no Aunt Rebecca. Ethan had assumed illness made her confused. Maybe she had been afraid. Daniel continued. Your mother contacted Sarah. They exchanged documents. Sarah was supposed to safeguard evidence in case your father tried to destroy it. Emma whispered, my mother never told me. She was protecting you. The phrase landed differently this time. Real protection. Quiet. Costly. Without reward. Ethan stared at Daniel. And the 14 million. That came later. From whom? Daniel looked at Madison. Thomas Brooks. Madison's head snapped up. Ethan stood slowly. My father gave Sarah $14 million. Not voluntarily. Daniel pushed another file forward. Sarah found him. Emma covered her mouth. Daniel explained that years after Ethan became successful, Sarah traced Thomas Brooks through an old shell corporation. She confronted him. Not for herself. For Ethan. She demanded that Thomas return money stolen from investors. Thomas agreed to transfer $14 million into a restitution trust. Sarah refused to put her own name as beneficiary. Instead, she insisted the money fund families harmed by the scheme. But the transfer never reached the victims, Daniel said. Why? Because someone intercepted the trust. Ethan already knew the answer. He looked at Madison. Daniel nodded. Richard Caldwell discovered the transfer. He forged your signature to make it appear that Brooks Global created the trust. Emma looked horrified. Why? To wash the money clean. Daniel continued. Caldwell redirected most of it through charities and consulting companies. His charities, Ethan said. And some connected to Madison. Madison stood. My father handled finances. I was barely involved. Emma stared at her. But you knew about my mother. I knew her name. You went to her hospital room. Madison's voice cracked. Because my father told me to. The room froze. Her lawyer closed his eyes. Madison realized what she had admitted. Ethan stepped closer. Why? She started crying. This time the tears looked real. He said Sarah was dangerous. She was dying. He said she had evidence. What evidence? Madison shook her head. I don't know. Emma touched the brass key around her neck. Something moved behind her eyes. My mother kept saying something before she died. Everyone looked at her. She said, "The house remembers." Ethan frowned. The yellow house. Emma nodded. It was sold after we left. Daniel suddenly looked alarmed. What happened to the key? Emma held it up. Ethan stared. The house remembers. Sarah's key. A house sold decades ago. Then another memory arrived. The loose floorboard. Ethan and 4-year-old Emma hiding coins under it as a game. Sarah laughing from the kitchen. Careful, that old house keeps secrets. Ethan looked at Emma. The floor. Her eyes widened. They drove to Ohio before sunrise. Ethan, Emma, Daniel, Michael, 2 security officers, and a federal attorney who had already contacted investigators. Madison remained in Manhattan under legal supervision. The old yellow house was still standing. Barely. Paint peeled from the siding, the porch leaned farther than Ethan remembered. But the moment he saw it, 23 years disappeared. Emma stood beside him. I haven't been here since I was 9. Ethan looked at the brass key. You kept it all this time. My mother told me never to lose it. The key still worked. Inside, dust covered everything. The house had been vacant for years after a failed renovation. Ethan entered the den. The sofa was gone, but he knew where it had stood. He knelt near the wall. 3rd floorboard from the fireplace. He pressed. Nothing. Emma knelt beside him. 4th. Ethan looked at her. You remember. You taught me. She pushed. The board lifted. Underneath was a metal box. Nobody spoke. Emma's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were photographs, letters, bank ledgers, and a small cassette recorder. Daniel picked up one envelope. On the front, written in Sarah's handwriting, were 3 words. For Ethan Brooks. Ethan opened it. The letter was dated 12 years earlier. Ethan, if you are reading this, then the truth finally found you. Your mother was braver than anyone knew. Your father made terrible choices, but before the end, he tried to undo some of them. Richard Caldwell will do anything to bury what happened. Do not trust anyone who benefits from keeping your past hidden. And Ethan, if my daughter ever comes to you, please do not give her money simply because she is mine. Give her the one thing I gave you. A chance. His vision blurred. Emma looked away, crying silently. Ethan continued reading. There was one final line. Kindness is not a debt, it is a seed. He remembered Sarah placing $840 into his hands. Turn it into something. Ethan had believed she meant money. He finally understood. She meant kindness. Daniel inserted the cassette into an old portable player found inside the box. Static filled the room. Then Sarah's voice. Older, weaker, but unmistakable. If anyone finds this, Richard Caldwell knows what happened to Laura Brooks. Ethan froze. Laura, his mother. The recording continued. Laura believed Richard threatened Thomas into disappearing. She discovered accounts proving Richard was moving stolen money through medical charities. Ethan's jaw tightened. Medical charities. His mother's treatment. The implication was monstrous. Sarah continued. Laura's insurance coverage was manipulated after she threatened to go to federal investigators. Her treatment was delayed for nearly 4 months. Ethan stopped the tape. No. Nobody spoke. He stared at the machine. My mother died because she couldn't get treatment. Daniel's face was pale. We need investigators to verify everything. Ethan pressed play again. Sarah's voice returned. Thomas confessed this to me before his death. He believed Richard's interference contributed to Laura's death. Thomas spent the rest of his life afraid to tell Ethan. A crash sounded behind them. Everyone turned. One of the windows had shattered. Down, security shouted. A rock rolled across the floor. Wrapped around it was a note. Michael picked it up cautiously. 2 words. Leave it. Someone knew they were there. Daniel looked outside. A black SUV disappeared at the end of the road. The past was no longer buried. It was fighting back. Within 48 hours, the story exploded. Federal investigators reopened records tied to Richard Caldwell's businesses. Reporters surrounded Brooks' global headquarters. Madison disappeared from public view. Richard Caldwell released a statement calling the accusations a malicious fabrication. Then investigators found something he hadn't expected. Sarah had duplicated everything. The box beneath the floor was only 1 copy. Another had been mailed years earlier to an attorney with instructions to open it if anyone attempted to seize the Whitmore property. Bank records followed. Then emails. Then testimony from 2 retired accountants. Richard Caldwell was arrested 3 weeks later. Madison was not charged with her father's original fraud, but investigators examined whether she had obstructed attempts to contact Ethan and whether she knowingly participated in financial concealment. The engagement ended formally. The ring never returned to her finger. But Ethan's most important decision had nothing to do with Madison. It happened in a quiet conference room 1 month later. Emma sat across from him wearing jeans and a simple blue sweater. No uniform. No tray. No ballroom. Ethan placed a folder on the table. Emma looked suspiciously at it. What's that? A job offer. She almost laughed. You don't even know what I do. I do now. He had learned everything. Emma had worked housekeeping jobs while completing night classes in accounting. She had dropped out twice to care for her mother. Then returned. She was 3 courses away from finishing her degree. Ethan pushed the folder closer. Junior forensic analyst, paid training, tuition covered. Emma stared at him. You're doing this because of my mother. Yes. Her expression hardened. Ethan smiled faintly. And no. She waited. Your mother told me not to simply give you money. Emma's eyes filled. She wrote that. She told me to give you a chance. Emma looked at the contract. What if I'm terrible at it? Then you'll be terrible at it. She laughed despite herself. And then you'll learn. She looked at him. For the first time since the ballroom, neither of them saw Sarah's ghost standing between them. They simply saw each other. 2 people whose lives had been changed by the same woman. Emma took the job. A year later, she graduated. 3 years later, she led a forensic compliance unit dedicated to detecting charitable fraud. The Sarah Whitmore Community Fund was rebuilt with every recovered dollar from the stolen trust, plus a personal contribution from Ethan. But he refused to name the main building after himself. Instead, engraved above its entrance were Sarah's words. Kindness is not a debt, it is a seed. Years passed. Ethan became different too. Not softer in business. Clearer. He began paying attention to the people no one else noticed. Drivers, janitors, assistants, servers. Not because Sarah's daughter had once been one of them. Because he finally understood how easily wealth could distort vision. People bowed to power. Power revealed character by deciding who deserved to stand upright. One evening, nearly 5 years after the engagement party, Ethan attended a gala for the Whitmore Fund. The ballroom was grander than the one where everything had begun. Executives greeted him. Investors shook his hand. Some people still lowered their heads slightly when he approached. Ethan disliked it now. Across the room, Emma stood speaking with a group of scholarship recipients. She was no longer the quiet maid everyone had ignored. She was a respected investigator whose team had recovered millions from fraudulent charities. A young server accidentally bumped into a wealthy guest nearby. Champagne spilled across the guest's jacket. The young man turned red with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, sir." The guest raised his voice. "Do you have any idea how expensive this is?" The room began to turn. Ethan started walking toward them. But Emma arrived first. She handed the guest a napkin. Then she looked at the trembling server. "Are you okay?" The guest stared at her. "My jacket is ruined." Emma smiled. "The dry cleaner can fix a jacket." Then she nodded toward the frightened server. "Humiliation takes longer." Ethan stopped several feet away. For a moment, he saw Sarah. Not literally, but in the way that mattered. The seed. Still growing. Later that night, Ethan stepped outside onto the terrace. Emma joined him. "You disappeared. Needed air." She leaned on the railing. Below them, Manhattan glowed. Ethan looked at her. "Your mother would be proud." Emma smiled. "She'd probably tell us both to stop attending expensive parties." Ethan laughed. "That sounds like her." Emma touched the brass key still hanging from her necklace. "I used to wonder why she kept this." "The house." "No." She looked at him. "You." Ethan's smile faded. "She spent years wondering whether you remembered us. I should have found her. She knew you tried." "Not enough." Emma studied him. "You know what she'd say." Ethan did. "Kindness is not a debt." He looked back through the glass doors. Hundreds of wealthy guests filled the ballroom. Years earlier, he would have measured the room in net worth. Influencer. Connections. Today he noticed the employees moving silently between them. People carrying trays. Cleaning glasses. Opening doors. People who saw everything and were rarely seen. "I almost married Madison," he said. Emma nodded. "You were lonely." Ethan looked at her in surprise. "How do you know?" "People accept strange things when they're afraid of being alone." He considered that. "Sarah teach you that too?" "No." Emma smiled sadly. "Life did." Behind them, applause erupted. The foundation director had announced the next scholarship recipient. Emma started toward the door. Then stopped. "Oh, Ethan." "Yes." "Someone mailed this to my office yesterday." She handed him an envelope. No return address. Inside was a photograph. Ethan's breath caught. It showed Sarah standing beside Thomas Brooks, Ethan's father. The date on the back was only 6 months before Thomas supposedly died. But it was the third person in the picture who made Ethan's blood run cold. Richard Caldwell. All three were smiling. Underneath the date, Sarah had written one sentence. "We finally agreed on how to protect Ethan." Ethan stared at it. "That doesn't make sense." Emma shook her head. "My mother said Caldwell was dangerous." "Then why was she meeting him?" "I don't know." Ethan flipped the photograph over again. There was something else in the envelope. A key. Not Sarah's brass house key. A modern safety deposit key. And a number. Emma looked at him. "Do you think it's over?" Ethan stared through the ballroom glass at a room full of people celebrating truth, justice, and Sarah Whitmore's legacy. Then he looked down at the mysterious key. For years, he had believed Sarah's secret was about exposing Richard Caldwell. But what if she had been protecting Ethan from something else? What if Thomas Brooks had not been the coward Ethan believed him to be? What if Richard Caldwell had once been part of an agreement none of them understood? And if Sarah had hidden one final truth in safety deposit box 317? What was so dangerous that she had carried it to her grave? Ethan closed his hand around the key. "Maybe," he said quietly, "we've only uncovered the part she wanted us to find first." Emma stared at him. Inside, the applause continued. Outside, the city stretched endlessly beneath them. And somewhere, inside a locked box that had waited years to be opened, the final secret of Sarah Whitmore was still waiting. But whatever that secret contained, Ethan already knew one truth that no fortune, scandal, betrayal, or hidden document could ever change. 23 years earlier, when Sarah Whitmore stopped her car for a hungry boy in the rain, she had no idea what he would become. She did not bow to him. She did not know he would one day control billions. She did not calculate what kindness might return to her. She simply saw someone who needed help. Years later, in a ballroom filled with people desperate to impress that same boy after he became powerful, Sarah's daughter did exactly what her mother had taught her. She stood upright. And when someone called her a beggar, Ethan finally realized that the poorest person in that room had never been the woman carrying the tray. Poverty of money could change. Poverty of character was far more expensive. And sometimes, the person society overlooks is carrying the truth powerful people have spent their entire lives trying to hide. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, remember its message. Never measure a person's worth by their job, clothes, bank account, or social position. The person serving your food, cleaning your office, opening your door, or standing quietly in the background deserves the same dignity you would show a billionaire CEO. If you believe respect should be given because someone is human, not because they are wealthy or powerful, kindly subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more powerful stories like this. And tell us in the comments, did Ethan make the right decision when Madison revealed how she truly viewed Emma? Would you have ended the engagement too? And most importantly, what do you believe could be waiting inside safety deposit box 317?